Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to proceed with the, or continue with the testimony of this witness, but I have an additional instruction to you at this time. To the extent that you've heard reference to reports of pathologists other than those who will or who have or who will testify here today, any that may have been relied upon in generating this demonstrative exhibit, you are to disregard such references and you are not to speculate to them in any way. All right, with that, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Roeder, we talked about obviously video number 3, and then you also created a video number 4.
Yes.
And I don't want you to describe the entire video. About 33 seconds in, there's a portion of the video that will later be played to the jury.
Okay.
So can you please just describe that particular portion?
Okay. Video number 4 is a rendered fluid animation of the reconstruction of the gunshot wounds, and not only the gunshot wounds, but the both parties in relationship to each other inside of the environment, with their spatial relationships addressed, with their biomechanics addressed, with the pathology addressed, with the final positioning addressed in a fluid sequence of events that's been rendered out for your better understanding of the events, factoring in the totality of the circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Roeder. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Sure.
Ms. Day?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Roeder, first of all, you were not present on December 31st, 2014, correct?
No, I was not there.
Okay, so when you are referring to creating these particular animations, you are essentially relying on that, correct?
Well, I mean, like any expert, what you do is you review the file that's given to you, and then you apply your discipline and your methodology to come up with the final reconstruction, yeah.
Okay, so it is based on the information you were provided, not on any personal knowledge you may have had from witnessing any events?
No, I didn't witness any events.
Okay. And speaking specifically about the last video that you talked about, the portion 33 seconds in of video number 4, I believe you had indicated that in this particular matter you had access to the defendant.
I did.
Did she tell you an order of shots?
Oh, absolutely not.
And did she tell you the body placements of herself during the sequence of shots?
No, but what was discussed was this setup, the foundation, to put the two parties into a spatial relationship with each other, so that at least we had a starting point.
So I understand you're using specific terminologies, but am I correct that you were telling me that she gave you information as to where she was standing and what she was doing, at least at some point in time in that particular sequence?
Yes, she gave me information.
Okay. What was that information?
The information was at a particular point, we discussed where were you and where was he? And that was essentially right before the event happened, or the event that we're talking about here, the shooting event, so that we had a beginning point to put the two parties.
Any information provided as to anyone's location after the beginning point?
That I relied on just from her interview? Well, I mean, her position, I think, at the end of the shooting, I relied on, where she said she was when it was done.
Okay, and do you recall what that was?
Toward the body, after the weapon had been discharged.
When you refer to toward the body, do you mean closer to?
Right.
Any specific distances or any relation to any other objects in the room given to you?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to talk about it without actually sharing the animation with you. I mean, I guess you'll get to see it in a little bit, but I relied on her not testimony, but her information that she gave to me, so that we had a starting point of where they were before the event started and where everybody was after the event was over. So to keep it general for you.
Okay. And I believe when talking about video number 1, when we're the walkthrough that we observed,
Right.
I believe you described it as it gives some generalities to give you an idea of what the place looks like, to create the scene to set forth your animation. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, a little bit more than that, but yeah, you kind of got it.
Well, at one point in time during the animation, there was an animation done where you can, for the first time, see what appears to be a blue figure lying on the floor.
Correct. That's an analog grid that we use to, resemble the parties.
Correct. And you then immediately show a photograph after that was taken from the crime scene of the body laying on the ground.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, my observations of those two things, they do not appear to be 100% correct. So their body appears to be in a different position. So what I'm asking you is it meant to simply be a generality in that walkthrough of the scene? Or are you saying that walkthrough is scientifically or in some way measured out specific, this is the exact position?
What inaccuracies are you referring to?
The width of the body, for example, where the legs are in relation to the hallway.
Well, I mean, the way we put it together, just to clarify, is, we use the crime scene photographs, and we use a technique called photogrammetry. And basically what that is, because I didn't have an opportunity to go into the scene. I'm not a first responder, so I didn't have an opportunity to physically see the event directly after, like a police officer might when they receive a 911 call. So I have to rely almost exclusively on the evidence that's provided to me, and those photographs were taken sometime after the event happened. The EMTs were there, other police officers were there, and then the photographer comes in, and then he takes photographs. So that's what I have to rely upon. So I take those photographs and I import those into our computer-generated modeling system, and we use this technique to kind of mimic the camera angle of the crime scene photograph so that we can use that to place the dog gate, the tiles on the floor, things like that, so that, basically having an accurate environment to start the reconstruction.
All right, so let me phrase it this way. If there are any visual inaccuracies that may be seen, are you telling me that would have been an inaccuracy that was created by a computer program?
I'm not sure what inaccuracies you're referring to, ma'am.
We're not here to dispute whether or not there are or aren't any. I'm asking you if this jury, who has seen it, and may likely see it again, sees any inaccuracies. Are you telling me that if there is any misplacements or any inaccuracies from the animation created to the photo, that would have been something that had been done through a computer program?
I don't really understand the question 100%. Maybe you understand the way it's created.
No, sir, I understand the way it's created. You take a photograph, you put it into your system, you calculate the angle, and your computer system generates an image. I understand.
Well, there's some manual aspects to it as well.
I understand. What I am saying, I understand you don't believe there is any inaccuracies. I understand that.
I didn't say that. I was just asking.
Okay, all right. You know what? We're not going to have an argument. Pose a question, answer the question.
I'm trying.
No, I'm telling you, pose a question, and I'm telling you to answer a question as best you can. Start with a question.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. The photograph and the animation, that is done first by a computer and then some manual manipulation. Is that a fair general statement?
Generally, I suppose it's pretty fair.
All right. Now, you had indicated that one of the things that you had reviewed with regards to video 3 was the autopsy report of Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Did you, fair to say you did not collaborate with Dr. Miller in the creation of this animation in any way, is that correct?
No, I've not worked with Dr. Miller, just reviewed and interpreted his report.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Are you a forensic pathologist?
No.
All right, so when you say you're interpreting his report, you're not interpreting his medical conclusions, are you?
No, it's a visual interpretation because when the doctor uses, terms like 4.5 inches from the top of the head and 2 inches from the center of the midline, you need to be able to see that. So it's a visual interpretation.
And would you agree that in your review of Dr. Miller's autopsy report, that he never provides within that document a specific sequence of shots in accordance to the wounds that he found?
I agree.
And are you aware that Dr. Miller also testified that he could not provide a specific sequence of shots, in that there's numerous different types of sequences that could have happened based on the wound patterns that he found in the medical evidence?
Yeah, I'm aware.
Objection?
Objection.
Okay. Overruled.
So overall, sir, especially with regards to the sequence of shots that we've talked about, video number 4, isn't it true that animation is based on what you were provided by a paid expert, Dr. Harshbarger, what the defendant provided you, and the photographs and other crime scene information? Is that
Not entirely, no.
Not entirely.
No, I put my own input into it. This is my work. It's my work product. This is what I do for a living. I reconstruct crime scenes and shooting scenes specifically, so I relied upon my own expertise to put it together as well, yeah.
To physically create the item.
That's right. Okay. And plot out the trajectories and all of that, yeah.
Specifically with regards to trajectories, you reviewed Dr. Miller's report, correct?
I did.
Would you agree with me that in his report, the descriptives he gives for either trajectories or angle of wounds are general in the sense of slightly up, slightly down, slightly left, slightly right?
I would agree with you, but you have to understand that he also provides intersecting anatomy. And when you have a knowledge of human anatomy, particularly as it relates to what we call terminal ballistics, you can take that intersecting anatomy from the entrance wound, and then it perforates the skin, it goes through tissue, muscle, organs, and then that bullet jacket is recovered at a certain point in the body. And then you basically take that entry point and where that fragment is located, and you draw a straight line. And unless it fractures some type of heavy bone, it's going to be a pretty straight line. And so we use that technique to do what we call terminal ballistic trajectory analysis.
And sir, fair to say, you are telling me you are doing additional medical determinations beyond what the coroner themselves.
It's not medical.
It's not medical.
No.
And would you also agree with me in reviewing Dr. Miller's report that there were, I believe, 4 shots that he could not give you which wound corresponded to which bullet?
That's true, yeah.
Okay, so for at least 4 of those shots, you could not do this little intersection thing you're talking about, correct?
The little intersection thing?
Yeah, I mean, the best way I can describe it at the moment.
Okay. On 4 shots, there were the bullets kind of crossed paths. So there wasn't a defined trajectory wound that you can identify. So it was difficult. Like she said, it's true. You can't match the fragment to an entrance wound on 4 of the shots.
So no trajectory was able to be determined?
Well, yeah, for each, you couldn't match the jacket, you couldn't match the fragment to the entrance wound.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? I just have one last question. I believe you testified that you've been working on this particular matter for approximately a year. Is that correct?
Approximately.
And as of today's date, from the entire time that you were first retained to today, how much have you been paid for your involvement in reviewing these documents, reviewing the items, and creating the animation and your presence here today?
Well, I don't have my receipt book on me, but I think it was somewhere in the range of $7,000 total.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions, John.
Any redirect?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Roeder, you can step down. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge.
Ms. Mills, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will call Dr. Harshbarger, and he's right outside, so welcome.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Dr. Harshbarger.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
Sure, my name is Dr. Kent Harshbarger, Harshbarger.
And Doctor, what is your present occupation?
Currently, I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm currently in Montgomery County Coroner. I work as an Army Reserve Colonel for the Armed Forces Medical Examiner. I'm currently also a consultant with the Ohio State Coroner Association. My title is Chief Forensic Officer, which I think means the complaint department. I work at the VA as a consultant in the autopsy service.
And how long have you been the coroner of Montgomery County?
I've been a deputy coroner, 2000 to 2011 was my fellowship, and I did that in Dayton, Ohio as well, and then I came back in November of 2002 as a deputy coroner. My boss retired in 2011, so September of 2011 I was elected in 2012.
And can you give us, Doctor, just kind of a brief description of your education?
Sure. I graduated college in 1990. I attended Southern Illinois University School of Law from 92 to 96, and Southern Illinois University School of Medicine from 92 to 96. I graduated with my law degree and medical degree in 1996. I did my anatomic and clinical pathology residency at Baltimore Hospital in Muncie, Indiana from 96 to 2000. From 2000 to 2001, I did my forensic pathology fellowship. And then in 2005 to 2011, I finished an MBA at Wright State University.
And what certifications or licenses do you currently hold?
I'm licensed to practice medicine in Ohio, Indiana, and I just made my Illinois license, which I had inactive because they raised the prices too much. And then certifications, is my board certifications. And I'm board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology and also the subspecialty of forensic pathology.
And Doctor, since you brought up the board certification that you hold, can you kind of explain what board certified means?
Ultimately, it means I passed a test, but they create, the board creates educational standards, which includes a accredited residency program, particular training milestones that you met through that program, and then ultimately are able to successfully pass an exam that they create and grade.
And what type of administrative or professional appointments do you hold?
I am currently the chairman of the National Association of Medical Examiners Ethics Committee. I am past president of the American College of Legal Medicine, which is an organization of basically physician attorneys. I think that's about it.
How about memberships?
The relevant ones are a member, as I just said, of the National Association of Medical Examiners, a member of the American Academy of Forensic Science, member of the American College of Legal Medicine.
And do you regularly provide lectures?
I do. Most of them are community-based educational talks, or EMS, fire. Just did one yesterday to the trauma nurses. I also am a clinical assistant professor, which means I don't get paid, in the Department of Pathology at Wright State University and also at Ohio U's Osteopathic Med School.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Doctor, I'm handing you what has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit AAA. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, this is my curriculum vitae, and this one's dated February 2016.
Okay, and I take it the CV was created by yourself?
It was, yes.
At this point in time, Your Honor, I would offer Dr. Harshbarger as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
You will be so designated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Harshbarger, in this particular matter that you're here to testify, what materials did you review?
I have to look back at my report to
That's fine.
refresh myself here, but the death certificate, autopsy report from Dr. Miller, Stark County, Ohio, Stark County Coroner's investigative report, Stark County Coroner's statement on the cause and manner of death, AIT Laboratories toxicology report, forensic laboratory reports from BCI Attorney General's Office, Madison Women's Police Department.
Doctor.
Sorry,
Good,
I got
but
you.
we are, we're not superhuman, I keep saying.
I understand.
Slow down, please.
Gotcha. Apologize. Should I
Can you
start
go,
over?
can you, just, I think she probably got about the first half of that.
All right, so middle of Stark County Coroner's statement on cause and manner of death, toxicology report on from AIT Laboratories, forensic laboratory reports from BCI Attorney General's Office, Maslin Police Department report / supplement, and scene and autopsy photographs.
And Dr. Harshbarger, do you currently in your file have a copy of the autopsy report from Dr. Miller?
I do.
Okay. Do you have page 20 of that autopsy report?
I do.
Okay, and I'm going to put this on the elbow. Please make sure that obviously what you're looking at as page 20 is what I have now put on the elbow, if you would please.
It is the same document,
Okay.
at least the top half.
And Dr. Harshbarger, in your review of the 10 gunshot wounds to Mr. McKernan, did you arrive at a probable shot sequence?
Yes.
Okay. And could you actually can write on that screen, Dr. Harshbarger, if we could just go through, obviously starting with what you believe is the first shot, and then we'll describe those all the way through if we can.
I can. I believe the first shot, in my opinion, is the. Is there a way to erase?
I don't know how to erase. Jeff, you get it?
Clear all. Thank you.
There you go.
No,
Thank
no.
you.
On your monitor, there's little squares on the bottom that say clear last, clear all, on the corners, I'm sorry. On the
Okay.
individual corners of the monitor, you see where it says clear all?
Oh, right there. Clear last. I
Clear
do.
last, you can do that with him, and
Okay.
he can do the same.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So the question is kind of what I describe on this diagram, my probable shot sequence, which is more likely than not.
Okay.
First injury basically is described, and it's the wound to the right upper lip.
Okay, and let's describe each one as we go through, if we can, Doctor.
Sure. Right upper lip is the gunshot wound of entrance that then has a pathway that penetrates through basically the teeth, the structures of the face, and into the base of the skull, ending up in the right side of the brain, what's called the occipital lobe. And what's significant with that wound is it has an area of what's called gunpowder stippling or tattooing around the wound, which means there's other things that come out of the end of a barrel besides the bullet. So there's heat, there's smoke, and then there's gunpowder that's burnt and unburnt. All those travel a relatively known approximated distance. But this wound only had stippling around it, measured approximately 2.5 inches to one side, and approximately the left side is sort of indeterminate, but it created a relatively uniform pattern. Stippling begins in one spot, which is the end of the barrel, and then will travel in 360 degrees outward. Unless it hits an intermediate target, it'll strike the skin, creating that circle pattern. So this wound had that pattern.
And what is significant about finding stippling pattern, Doctor?
Sure. Stippling, by finding the things I just talked about, which is heat, smoke, or stippling, we get an idea of the range. So because we only have stippling, this is defined as an intermediate range wound, which is roughly, it's anywhere from 8 inches to about 24 inches, but most likely 18 to 24 inches is the estimate that we give. Because it's too wide, it's begun to disperse in a wider pattern than up close.
And when you're discussing those measurements, is that from the barrel then into the wound site?
Correct, from the muzzle to the target, which is the skin.
Thank you. And then, Doctor, if you would move on to what you believe is the second shot in the shot sequence.
And then the second shot, if I can get it, that's my fingers. Well, it's the line there is drawn to the area which is the left lip, that left upper lip. That wound is a gunshot wound of entrance. Again, in the autopsy report, defined as having stippling. And I believe that's correct because, as we talked about, stippling originating from the end of the barrel, traveling at 360 degrees unless you have an intermediate target. Well, in this case, we sort of have an intermediate target, which is the nose. So the right lip, the left side, particularly behind the nasal fold, is going to be somewhat protected from a shot coming from the right side of the nose. So the fact that they're stippling on that cheek, sort of behind that, tells us that it's coming from the left and the right. So there is some stippling coming from that wound of the left lip, which then travels through the mouth and ends up in the upper part of the right posterior neck, or the upper neck on the just right of midline.
And do you have an opinion on whether or not the distances of shot 1 and shot 2 are different?
I do, yes.
And why?
Sure. To my eye, when I read the autopsy report and evaluate the dimensions which Dr. Miller measured, and then looking at the autopsy photographs, the pattern is a relatively uniform 360 circle around gunshot wound number 1. Around gunshot number 1, around gunshot of entrance number 2, the pattern is not off to the left, so it's not a uniform circle. So basically, I believe that most of that stippling is coming from gunshot wound number 1, creating a nice uniform circle, and then there is some, because we know it's on the nasolabial fold from wound 2. So I believe that that means we're at the maximum distance which stippling will be deposited, because I don't have it on the left side of the cheek. So what stippling is traveling they're all traveling at the same rate, same speed. But once we get to a particular distance, the face is curved. So I have to travel farther from my left lip to farther back on my left cheek, because I'm going around a curved surface. So I believe we're at the max of where that stippling can hit, and it's hitting the lip, the face, the nose, making it appear possibly a little more dense around gunshot wound 2, but it can't hit the left cheek because it's farther back. So whatever range you want to describe to it, and I can't say what the range is, they're different to me. The stippling pattern from gunshot wound to 2 is different to my eye in the autopsy photographs.
And even though you say that you cannot specifically state the distance, can you tell what the maximum distance would have been for either gunshot 1 or 2 from the muzzle, obviously, and to the wound site?
Well, only by the typical estimates that we use, and then and obviously it was done in this case, but test firing the weapon with the same ammunition, the same weapon. So roughly we use as forensic pathologists 18 to 24 inches as our rough estimate of where that intermediate range wound would be, muzzle to target. In this case, we have some test firing that seems to confirm that 18 to 24 inches where reproducible patterns are made. But they also have distances out to 30 inches. So I don't really know what a maximum distance could be, but in the test firing, stippling was deposited up to 30 inches.
Thank you, Doctor. If you could then continue on with where you believe shot number 3 would be located.
I believe then shot number 3 would be the chest shot, which I'll try there. Green, I think that shows up, the green dot. So sort of mid-right chest. And that one then travels inward and ends up in the vertebra or the vertebral body of the thoracic spine. So it has a slight pathway through the body that is right to left.
And gunshot number 4, Doctor?
I believe then gunshot number 4 is highlighted there, which struck the lower left abdomen. And then that gunshot wound travels, the autopsy report, because it's traveling along a similar and destructive path of other wounds, It's not clear, it wasn't clear to Dr. Miller where this projectile ended up, but I think it's probable that it's traveling across, so from his left to right, a little bit front to back, but the projectile is recovered in the right lower chest, so it's traveling, and this entrance wound is 42 inches from the heel. The lowest projectile recovered in the right chest was recovered at 40 inches, so it's traveling somewhat down from the entrance wound. And obviously, because he couldn't track them, I can't track them, but I'm presuming that 40-inch wound, the bullet recovered at 40 inches is the associated projectile, because as we'll see, there's a grouping of 3 projectiles on the left back and 3 projectiles that are at the same height. So they're within inches of one another across. So I'm presuming we have an entrance wound 10 inches lower, we have a projectile 10 inches lower, that those two are in association.
And Doctor, just with those 2 gunshots wounds that you've described, 3 and 4, do you have an opinion on whether or not those 2 shots were from a farther distance than shots 1 and 2 that you described?
Yes, they're farther away. There's no markers of distance on the skin. That being said, there's clothing here, so sort of there's no heat on the skin, there's no soot on the skin, there's no stippling on the skin, there's no description of the clothing having burn marks, there's no description of the clothing having soot, and there's no testing, as far as I know, that would verify whether stippling was present or not.
Okay, doctor, slow down.
I apologize.
Slow down. Thank you.
Probably 5 more times before this is over. I'll try.
Well, I will do it too.
Please.
Okay, so I'm sorry, on that last, were you ending? I think you were talking about the 4th gunshot. I just want to make sure, Doctor, that your testimony was heard. And then obviously Elena picked it up.
I was talking about, I need refreshed. Where was I?
I think you were talking about the fact that there was not any stippling or soot found on the clothing.
So all those markers that would be on the skin should be on the overlying clothing. So to be fair and technical, these wounds would be called indeterminate because there's an intermediate target, the clothing. But they are also, indeterminate is the same as a distant in appearance. So all I can say is they're farther than 2 feet away in a generality. They're at a greater distance than the wounds to the face.
Thank you, Doctor. If we could continue on then with gunshot wound number 5.
Well, then there are some assumptions now that I believe assumptions in position. I don't mean assumptions in what I believe in, but I believe 5 is the one to the left arm, to the lateral side of the left upper arm, which then exits the inside or medial portion of the left upper arm, which I'll highlight.
So where would that arm be located based on what you've just described, Doctor?
Well, I need one more wound and I can relate that. So then it re-enters the torso, which I believe is this wound there. And then the bullet pathway is front to back, and the projectile is recovered near the anterior side of the collarbone or scapula, the shoulder blade or scapula, and I'll try to slow down. I'm sorry. I'll self-correct myself. So the projectile enters the torso front to back and is recovered from in front of or anterior to the left shoulder blade or scapula. Because I believe it's entrance, exit, and re-entry, I believe that upper arm has to be forward to make that pathway through the torso make sense. So that arm is coming forward, that projectile enters the lateral side, which is now facing forward, comes out the medial side, enters the lateral torso, and ends up in front of the left shoulder blade.
Thank you, Doctor. And again, is there any way to know the particular distance then of the 5th gunshot wound that you've just described?
Technically, no. It would be an indeterminate range wound. It's distant. That's the same as what a distant range wound would look like, assuming the clothing does not have the markers of range.
Okay. Then is it your opinion that gunshot wound occurred farther than gunshots 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay. If you'd continue on then with gunshot wound number 6, please.
6 would then be the lateral torso. So now we have an entrance wound that's a little farther back on the torso, and this projectile is now traveling sharply left to right, and the projectile is recovered by the right scapula. So the arm has to now be out of the way. The projectiles now come from the decedent's left across to the right.
Okay, and when you say that the arm has to be out of the way, describe what you believe the arm position was.
Well, if my probable sequence is correct, the left arm's coming up and then it keeps coming forward. So as I turn, one shot enters my arm through the chest, left scapula. As I turn more, left chest sharply across to the right chest.
And gunshot wound number 7.
Well, now, basically what I believe happened, we need to really address 7, 8, and 9.
That's fine, Doctor. However, obviously,
as a sequence. There's no way to know 9, 7, 8, 8, 7, 9. In my opinion, it's 7, 8, 9, and that's just a probability up, down. As the torso is dropping, I believe that's the muzzle. Within 2 or 3 inches of that 50 on the right chest. So these are basically going across the chest horizontally, basically.
And do you have any opinion as to distance?
Same, farther than the face, but ultimately this is an indeterminate range, same as distance, greater than 2 feet.
And shot number 10, Doctor.
Shot number 10 is the last gunshot wound described, which is in the right posterior hip area. That projectile basically goes horizontal from back to front. It's recovered from the anterior right hip area. And that, again, is a distant or indeterminate range wound.
And Doctor, I assume that you have testified both on behalf of the prosecution and on behalf of the defense in your career?
Yes, I have.
And what is the percentage of times that you have testified on behalf of the state?
So that's in civil and criminal. I'm fairly close, I think, in the civil arena. I am vastly more weighted state. In fact, I haven't checked my records, but I believe this is my second defense case, my first being as a resident. So I have not done this much.
At least on behalf of the defense.
On behalf of the defense, yeah. I tested, and that's a little skewed because my government job places me in the stand, so I don't know that that's a fair comparison. I happen to have the same job Dr. Miller has, which puts me here, so I'm often for the state.
Doctor, can you describe for me the factors that you considered in coming up with this probable shot sequence?
Factors, another word we could use is factors is fine. The first factor is that muzzle to target, and then that's the word trajectory defines muzzle to target. The word pathway, which we as pathologists use, is what happens inside the body. One of the assumptions is that's a straight line. Trajectory and pathway line up. So from the muzzle to the target is a straight line. In the pathways, straight lines. The other critical assumption is that we have placed 10 gunshot wounds into a very narrow window of time, because as I'm understanding, there is evidence to suggest a sound sequence, which was very rapid. can't track them. I'd have to look. The exact entrance is somewhere around 50 inches. The projectiles were covered within 2 or 3 inches of that 50 on the right chest. So these are basically going across the chest horizontally, basically.
And do you have any opinion as to distance?
Same, farther than the face, but ultimately this is an indeterminate range, same as distance, greater than 2 feet.
And shot number 10, Doctor?
Shot number 10 is the last gunshot wound described, which is in the right posterior hip area. And that projectile basically goes horizontal from back to front. It's recovered from the anterior right hip area. And that, again, is a distant or indeterminate range wound.
And Doctor, I assume that you have testified both on behalf of the prosecution and on behalf of the defense in your career?
Yes, I have.
And what is the percentage of times that you have testified on behalf of the state?
So that's in civil and criminal. I'm fairly close, I think, in the civil arena. I am vastly more weighted state. In fact, I haven't checked my records, but I believe this is my second defense case, my first being as a resident. So I have not done this much.
At least on behalf of the defense?
On behalf of the defense, yeah. And that's a little skewed because my government job places me in the stand, so I don't know that that's a fair comparison. I happen to have the same job Dr. Miller has, which puts me here, so I'm often for the state.
Doctor, can you describe for me the factors that you considered in coming up with this probable shot sequence?
Factors, another word we could use is factors is fine. The first factor is that muzzle to target, and then that's the word trajectory defines muzzle to target. The word pathway, which we as pathologists use, is what happens inside the body. One of the assumptions is that's a straight line. Trajectory and pathway line up. So from the muzzle to the target is a straight line. In the pathways, straight lines. The other critical assumption is that we have placed 10 gunshot wounds into a very narrow window of time, because as I'm understanding, there is evidence to suggest a sound sequence, which was very rapid.
described, would you expect to find teeth fragments to the rear of the head, almost 2 feet behind the body?
As I just stated, because of the hypothetical, I believe the lips are going to contain it, so that seems like a great distance. I don't know that I can say it's impossible. I think teeth would be contained in the mouth and travel backwards. I've done many cases where they're in the stomach, but I can't say it's not impossible, and if the mouth's open, that the teeth would travel.
Okay. Do you have an opinion if, in the hypothetical, the individual is upright and those shots occur to the right and to the left side of the mouth, where those teeth fragments may land?
Yes, but assuming the same scenario we just talked about, the teeth are together, the mouth's likely closed, they're contained, but then as you hit, likely as he was found, or at least documented at the scene, backwards, you've got a mouth that can move, and you've got force because you've levered your head onto the ground. So now you've created a mechanism where those teeth can launch because the mouth can move and then land where they land. Again, 2 feet away, 6 inches away, I'm not capable of making that determination. To me, the decision is they're more likely to be in the mouth till the head hits from a fall versus come out for the shot. Could happen with a shot.
Thank you, Doctor. And now let's talk about, obviously, this specific case and the specific wounds that you've already identified on what is page 20 of Dr. Miller's autopsy report. Shot number 1, which you have already indicated, what are the injuries that would be suffered to Mr. McKernan with shot number 1?
Well, the lips damaged, the teeth are damaged, there's fracturing of the facial structures, the base of the skull is fractured, the base of the brain, right temporal lobe, is damaged, and then the projectile is recovered from what's called the occipital lobe of the brain.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to how long Mr. McKernan would have voluntary movement after sustaining that wound?
To move, or they're just falling that way? I can't answer that. I believe it's possible there's at least some period of time, I believe it's very short, that momentum can be changed and started different directions.
And would shot number 1, would that have been lethal?
Shot number 1 is not necessarily lethal. He's not normal again. His brain is injured. Would our great medical care system allow him to survive in some fashion? I can't answer that question. So it's not something that he necessarily dies there from, but it's a devastating neurological injury that will leave him debilitated at best, if not unconscious.
And shot number 2, Doctor?
Shot number 2 is the entrance wound, I believe, to the left lip, or as it's described in the autopsy report. So again, lip, teeth, fracturing of the facial structures, and it's traveling from his left to right, downward, and is recovered. So mostly facial structures, bone, and then into the upper back of the neck is where the projectile is recovered.
Okay. And would that shot have been lethal?
That shot, if you mean in the sense of lethal, is he dropping right there? No. It certainly has the potential for it to be lethal. There's a lot of vascular structures that are now disrupted. Again, transport to a care facility, could he survive that? Yes. Could he recover from that? Yes.
Would you refer to that as a bleed out wound?
The mechanism, well, there's 2 possible mechanisms that wound could cause death. 1 is, yes, a bleed out wound. 2 is, because I didn't do the case, how close did that pathway come to the cervical spine? So potentially, what happens when a bullet passes through tissue is it's giving off a kinetic energy, which is dispersing energy. So what's created is called a temporary cavity. As a bullet passes, there's a temporary cavity that's created that's larger than the bullet. I don't know, just connecting the mechanism.
And Doctor, just moving forward, shots 2 through 10, would those all be referred to as bleed out wounds?
Yes, the mechanism of death, yes, essentially the mechanism of death in all of those is going to be from blood loss, except for the rare potential of 7, 8, 9, and wound 4. So the wound in the left abdomen, the 3 in the left lateral back. One of those projectiles, I believe it's one from 7, 8, or 9, passes through a portion of the heart called the atrial chambers. Once that happens, you bring in the potential of an arrhythmia because the temporary cavity still exists. So yes, these are bleeding. He's going to die from blood loss. There is a potential with that wound because it's close to what's called the conduction centers of the heart, the sinoatrial node, which mechanism where it's an arrhythmial death, or basically the heart begins to beat abnormally. So yes, they're all bleeding, they're all bleed out wounds. None of them necessarily mean you're no longer capable of voluntary movement. There is the rare possibility that he has an arrhythmia from the wound that strikes near the heart.
Okay. And in shots 2 through 10, in addition to voluntary movement, would Mr. McKernan have his full strength or full capacity of movement?
Yes, for whatever period of time that exists. I believe it, again, would be relatively short. There are 4 described projectile pathways through parts of the aorta, which is the main blood vessel arising from the top of the heart that brings blood to the rest of the body and the legs. There's one through the ascending aorta, there's one through the arch, there's one through the thoracic aorta, there's one other, I can't remember where it is. 3 or 4 wounds to the aorta. We have wounds to the atrial chambers of the heart. We have a wound to the pulmonary artery. Those are all your major blood-carrying vessels. He's fully capable to make some voluntary movements after those shots, but they're not long. 10, 15, 20 seconds, and he's going to lose blood pressure and no longer be able to be upright.
Doctor, in the shot sequence that you have described on Defendant's Exhibit H, page 20, based on your education, background, and experience, do you hold that shot sequence within a reasonable degree of certainty as the most probable shot sequence in this particular case?
Objection.
Well,
I'm sorry, into any animation.
I did review it, yes.
Okay. And in reviewing animation 3 and 4, was that consistent with the opinion that you have just given this jury?
Well, it is now. So there was a draft when I was involved in the case that he had already created a
sustained approach, counsel.
All right, Dr. Harshbarger, so you reviewed video 3 with Scott.
Yes.
All right. You had input to video 3.
Yes.
And video 3 is consistent with the opinion that you have given the jury today?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point in time, may we play animation 3?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Shots are entering his body.
Yeah, I think they're demonstrative of what we just talked about, our sequence.
Okay. And obviously, you had seen that demonstrative prior to today.
Yes.
Okay. And have you also seen video 4?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may we show video 4 starting obviously after the first 33 seconds? And again, is video 4 consistent with the opinions that you have rendered here today?
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions at this time.
Mr. Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Good afternoon, sir.
What is First Forensic Medical Laboratory?
That was when I left my fellowship. Started a private practice in Illinois where I contracted with the Central Illinois Coroners at my med school. I joined a faculty member. So it's just the name of the company I ran then, First Forensic Medical Laboratories. I've only maintained it as an entity for these adventures for mainly billing purposes.
Okay, so you're not here as the, what county is it, Montgomery?
Montgomery County, yes, sir, I'm not.
No, you're here on private business.
I'm on private business.
You're paid to be here.
I'm paid to be here, yes, sir.
Paid to render an opinion.
No, sir.
What'd you get paid for?
As you said, to be here for my time.
Well, you rendered an opinion here.
Absolutely.
And you wrote a report, right?
Yes, sir.
And you told Ms. Mills that your opinion was that what you described as the most probable sequence of wounds.
Correct.
But when you wrote your report, you said because of the above, it is possible to create a probable sequence of wounds. You didn't use the word most, and that's a difference, wouldn't you agree?
I would say well, is there two most? So, yes, the grammar is different. I'm not sure there's two. Most is most. I don't.
Well, a probable sequence, there's a lot of probabilities, right?
No, not when you attach A to probable. You can argue semantics, but probable means more likely than not.
You agree, Doctor, you were there on December 31st, 2014.
I agree with that. I was not there.
You didn't see what happened.
I did not see what happened.
You didn't examine the body.
I did not examine the body.
And there are a lot of ways.
As we laid out the framework, then no, I think the possibilities become much more narrow. Individually, and removing those, yes.
What if your assumptions are incorrect?
Absolutely.
What if your assumptions are based on improper information?
Then this is not the probable sequence.
In fact, you indicated when Ms. Mills asked you that you were referring to videos that there was a draft that you watched, right?
Yes.
And you asked Mr. Roder to change that draft because that draft wasn't correct, in your opinion.
Correct.
So there could be more than one opinion on how these shots in this shot sequence happened.
And I think I acknowledge that, particularly wound 4 through 7.
That's a yes or no, Doc, okay?
I'm allowed to recognize the
All right, stop. Yes or no question. If you need an opportunity, Ms. Mills can ask you additional questions.
There could be more than one opinion on how these shots or the sequence of these shots. Is that correct?
There can be more than one possibility and therefore more than one opinion. You're correct.
Yes. Doctor, what's a hemothorax?
Hemothorax is, well, the thorax is the chest cavity, left and right, and then hemo is blood within that.
Okay, and what's a hemoperitoneum?
Hemoperitoneum, the peritoneal cavity is the abdominal cavity, so it's blood within the peritoneal cavity.
And what's a hemopericardium?
Hemopericardium is the pericardial sac, blood within the pericardial sac.
And are you aware that Mr. McKernan had 1,230 milliliters between a right hemothorax, a left hemothorax, a hemopericardium, and a hemoperitoneum?
It's close. I can do the math. I think it's actually higher than that, but yes.
Okay. And those get there because the heart, after these wounds are inflicted, is still beating.
Yes. But the majority of that blood is there because the heart is still beating.
Now, you indicated that in your probable sequence of shots, the first two were to the mouth.
Yes.
What happens when that first one goes into Mr. McKernan's brain?
That is a variable. I don't know. I believe there would be opportunity for purposeful movement. It would be brief.
It'd be quite a jolt, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And he got that one.
Don't recall that, but probably.
And it bleeds pretty quickly.
All capillary beds bleed quickly. I don't know where we're... Yes.
I'm sure you have to mark the states and give it 19J.
Yes,
You
sir.
ever seen that photograph?
I have, yes.
Can you tell me what that's a photograph of?
Not without more information. I believe that's the lateral. It's the left upper arm, whether it's the inside or outside. I'd need to see the whole photo, but I believe it's the lateral side of the left upper arm.
Well,
It is.
show you 19K,
Perfect. That is the lateral left upper arm where he had this tattoo.
and that's a nice little round entrance wound, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that kind of indicates that the gun was perpendicular to Mr. McKernan?
No.
No?
The pathway does.
Let me show you what's been marked in State's Exhibit 19Q. You recognize that exhibit?
I do, yes.
And I'm going to put this on the screen. And I'm going to ask you, do you see this area of that injury?
Yes, sir.
And what is that?
That is called marginal abrasion. So when you have an entrance gunshot wound, the bullet is spinning and it'll penetrate and tear layers of skin first and then penetrate.
And it also means that the bullet is kind of entering not at a 90-degree angle, but at an angle like this.
No, it doesn't. You can't make that assumption. The pathway will give you that, help you determine that, but an irregular marginal abrasion, that relationship has to be maintained. That is not a wound that's coming from the feet up.
That is the gunshot wound in Dr. Miller's report of number 5.
Yes, sir.
And that bullet traveled front to back, right to left, and upward.
Correct.
Doctor, give me a minute. So, under your sequence of shots, Mr. McKernan suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the mouth, which fractured his teeth, which he was able to keep in his mouth, turn around, do this dance that we saw in the video to explain all the injuries that you talked about. Travel a distance of about 8 feet and not leave a drop of blood between here and there.
I don't know the distance. It was at 8 feet. I'm not the crime scene guy. If there was no blood, I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any requests? Your Honor? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harshbarger. You can step down.
Thank you.
You can leave it wherever. All right, ladies and gentlemen, obviously it is now 4:46, so we are at our stopping point for the day. We will be taking our evening recess. I indicated to you when we began, and I am still holding to this, that we are not going to be in session tomorrow, and that has nothing to do with these folks. It is entirely the court's schedule that is interfering. So if you want to be upset about that, be upset at me, not at either of those tables. We will, however, ask that you report, not be tempted to even attempt any additional investigation by way of area or internet or looking up anything. Please just be satisfied that you will receive the evidence in this case, and that is what you have taken an oath to base your decisions upon. Please, again, follow the suggestions about your intake of news with regard to your family or friends who can assist you in screening out anything that could potentially be about this case, because there is quite a bit out there, I assure you, on this subject of this trial. I just ask that you remember your oath to do as I've instructed you to do, and we will see you back here on Monday. Please report to the jury assembly room no later than 8:30. I expect to be able to get you promptly at 8:30 to be able to get you back here in order to continue. Please do, however, enjoy your weekend, and we will see you on Monday. We are in recess.